Good afternoon, everyone. Rob Bonta, California Attorney General here, and honored that you could join us, and thank you for carving out the time for a virtual discussion on the health and rights of farm workers. We're here today because just a couple of weeks ago, California celebrated a holiday in honor of one of our nation's leading labor and civil rights activists, Cesar Chavez. California has long been home to an abundance of orchards, vineyards, and farms that keep our nation fed. But in order for us to buy food at the store or slice up an apple at home, someone needs to harvest it. For generations, farm workers did the backbreaking work required to keep America fed. But America failed to recognize the fruits of their labor. That began to change when Cesar Chavez, along with Larry Itliong, Dolores Huerta, and other activists joined forces to create the United Farm Workers of America, catapulting the fight for better wages, better working conditions, dignity, and respect. Together, they built health clinics, daycares, job training programs, and a credit union for farm workers. They built a movement that resulted in groundbreaking union contracts and first in the nation farm labor law in 1975. Through tireless work, relentless persistence, and inspiring leadership, they made life better for farm workers in California and throughout the nation. Their story is personal for me because it's also how my story began. My parents, Cynthia and Warren, were civil rights activists, fierce forces for fairness. They marched with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Selma and fought for social justice in the Philippines, where I was born. When I was just 2 months old, as a dictator rose to power, they were forced to flee the Philippines and bring our family here to California. Through a series of events, my parents moved us to the Central Valley, to the headquarters of the United Farm Workers of America in La Paz. There they worked alongside Cesar Chavez and other organizers, including Dolores Huerta. My dad set up healthcare clinics, and my mom worked in the preschool, and they both worked with Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta and Philip Veracruz. I recently had a chance in one of the conversations that I so value and hold dear to with Dolores Huerta to ask her about those days. I asked her if when they were in the thick of the fight, when they were in the middle of it, fighting tooth and nail in the trenches, did they know that they would win? And I wasn't sure what she was going to say, but she said yes right away. No pause, no hesitation, no conditions, no qualification. She was sure. And that stuck with me. And I reflected on that. And it dawned on me that she knew they'd win because she had faith they'd win. She knew that what they were doing was right. And it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when they would prevail, when their righteousness would win the day. She had faith in their mission, faith that they were in the right, faith that if they worked hard enough for long enough, they'd end up on top eventually. And that sound of Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez saying and declaring, "Si se puede," echoes in my childhood memories. To this day, it's also a message I strive to bring to my work as Attorney General, to say, yes, we can fight for fair wages and good health care while still ensuring California companies can turn a profit. Yes, we can fight for worker rights and still have a successful economy. Yes, we can protect our environment and still be the nation's economic powerhouse, but only if we all work together. Only if we reject the fallacy that life is a zero-sum game, reject the flawed notion that for you to rise, someone else has to fall. One of the biggest lessons I learned watching Cesar Chavez is that there's no you versus me, no us versus them. There's only us. And we can only succeed when everyone succeeds, when everyone rises up to fight for and with one another. Together, we can make sure people don't face obstacles where there should be opportunity. We can advocate for people who deserve better. We can stand up for people we'll never meet. We don't know if we'll be successful. We have to have faith that we will, because we're fighting for what's right. And that's what truly matters. To me, that's the real legacy of Cesar Chavez that he left behind, at least with me. I'm excited to have the opportunity today to talk about that legacy and the impact it still has on farm workers, on labor, and on our state. I'd like to introduce two incredible activists to join me in that conversation. First, I'd like to welcome Roman Pinal. Roman has dedicated his career to fighting for better working and living conditions for our nation's farm workers and has helped win union contracts for strawberry, vegetable, and wine grape workers. He currently works with the UFW, directing their organizing department. Welcome, Roman.
So happy to be here. Happy Cesar Chavez month to everyone. Thank you, Attorney General Bonta.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to welcome a woman who needs no introduction, someone who built the farm worker movement with Cesar Chavez and who's never stopped fighting for all workers, never stopped fighting for justice, never stopped fighting for what's right. Someone who inspires me today just as much as she did when I was a little kid running around La Paz. Dolores Huerta, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Attorney General Bonta. Thank you for inviting me to join this wonderful conversation today.
Absolutely. So let's get started with some questions. We are all have been looking so forward to having both of you with us. We're honored and grateful that you are taking time out of your days to be with us. Let's jump in. This event, this is for Dolores. Dolores, this event is meant to honor the legacy of Cesar Chavez, and there is no one more fitting to tell us about Cesar's leadership than yourself, someone who fought side by side with him for so long. Can you tell us about what it was like to organize one of the most important movements in our state's history with the great Cesar Chavez?
Well, as you can imagine, it was quite a challenge. But one of the things I want to share about Cesar's philosophy and policies, both of us had studied the works of Mahatma Gandhi, and we wanted to fashion the United Farm Workers after Gandhi's teachings. And of course, that was dedicating the movement of the farm workers to nonviolence, okay? Because we know that in the past, there had been a lot of violence when people tried to organize farm workers, and we wanted to make this movement very different. The other thing is, Cesar always said, because as you mentioned, we never knew how long it was going to take to build a farm worker movement. But Cesar said one important thing. He said, you can never quit, because when you quit, you lose. And we had no idea how long it would take when we started, but we know that we were both very determined that we were going to stay with it, stay organizing. And, you know, it took a long time because we literally had to organize family by family, house by house in meetings so that the farm workers would get over their fear of coming together, their fear of the employers, that they would be retributions against them. So it actually took us 3 years. We started organizing in 1962, the National Farm Workers Association, which then became United Farm Workers. And then we, of course, the strike happened in 65. Then we had the boycott. But even before that, Cesar had been organizing in Oxnard starting since 1960. And I had been organizing farm workers in Stockton, California. And that's where I organized Larry Elong to join our movement. And I had started organizing farm workers in Stockton also since 1962, actually a little bit before that. But every time we tried to organize workers and we gave them to other unions, it kind of fell apart. And so that's when Cesar said, no, we've got to organize our own union. And that's when we started the United Farm Workers.
Amazing. Thank you for that. And I love of course, the deep roots in the tradition of nonviolence, as well as the teaching that to fight is to win, and you're winning when you're fighting, and you can never stop fighting. But if you're fighting for what's right, then you're on your path to victory, and you're winning it as you fight. So thank you for that, Dolores. Roman, Cesar Chavez paved the way for many of us leading important civil rights work. Tell us about the work that UFW continues to do and how you incorporate the teachings of Cesar Chavez into your work.
Well, I mean, I'm proud to say that one of my first ever trainings with the UFW was a house meeting training, and I got to role play with our co-founder, Dolores Huerta. And that in that training, that house meeting training in La Paz, Attorney General, I was given this little book, and it's hard to see it, but it's a Fred Ross axiom, Fred's axiom. And this Saturday, I was in Oxnard conducting a house meeting training, and we provided these little books. It's a modern version, a 2022, I think, version of it, to about 14 farm workers that were training how to continue what Dolores and what Cesar learned from Fred Ross and ingrained into our methodology of organizing, and we continue in that very, very similar approach. I think another important lesson that Dolores, and she just mentioned how Larry Leong and her helped bring farm workers together in Stockton, right? And the importance of understanding the power of diversity, right? Well, that's still ingrained in us today. Half the people that were with us on Saturday in Oxnard, their native language was not Spanish, it was Mixteco Bajo. They're from Mexico, from indigenous communities in Mexico who have their own challenges in regards to race and where winning respect. And so I was just blown away how farm workers today are incorporating some of those valuable lessons, grassroots organizing tactics like house meetings, and respecting and understanding the power that together we can achieve whatever it is that we need to, in terms of a solution for the problems in our community. I also was amazed on Sunday, we had a march, our annual Cesar Chavez March there in Oxnard, and we all stopped at the house where Cesar lived in Colonia, where there's a beautiful plaque there commemorating that he lived there in before the UFW started. And that points, I think, to another important lesson that Dolores and Cesar and those that we, shoulders that we stand on, that we have to build worker organizations that take action. We need to march. We need to confront. We need to speak truth to power, right? Because some of the challenges that exist today are very difficult, right? We're still going through the pandemic, right? But now, thankfully, because of the vaccine, we're beginning to see light at the end of the tunnel. But the toll it took with farm workers who, in a community like Oxnard, California, because of the rental inflation, the rental challenges there, live 2, 3, 4 families per small apartments. And so when you see those kinds of challenges today and the toll it takes on farm workers, whether it's the pandemic or climate challenges or the inflation that we're going through now, these are the challenges that we need to address, incorporating some of the amazing lessons from our compañera Dolores and Cesar.
Thank you, Roman. I was actually in Oxnard yesterday, and that's the place of my father's birth, and so a special place for my family, as well as, of course, for Cesar and the movement as well. And thank you for reminding us that movements are built house by house and person by person, block by block, and that's how you build up people power. And thanks for also reminding us about the need to confront. Something I thought about, when I was reading Letter from a Birmingham City Jail, it's something that Martin Luther King Jr. called creative tension. When you put a spotlight on on the injustice, and don't let people turn away from it, then it creates pain, and it creates hurt, and it forces people to act, to change it. And so you need to put people in that sort of position of creative tension, so that the change and the justice can be realized. So I really appreciate your comments. Thank you. And Dolores, I want to turn back to you for a moment. I'm sure you and Cesar were able to learn a lot from each other during your organizing efforts over many years, many fights in the trenches, many incredible world-renowned successes. What are some of the gems that you learned from Cesar that you can pass on to our viewers today? And what are some of the gems that you passed on to him?
Well, one of the gems that I love to share Cesar's sayings, he had many great sayings, but one of them that he said, and especially to students, when he was trying to get students to come and get involved in the movement, and he would say this to them: when you go to school, you write about history, you read about history, you talk about history, but when you become an activist and you join the movement, you make history. And that is really so important, because, the idea, in the farm worker movement, we had many young people that dropped out of school to come and join the movement. And there was no pay there, like for your dad and your mom when they joined us. There was like $10 a week. That was it. But the union, of course, took care of all of your expenses, your automobile expenses, but people didn't really get salaries. But so that really people that joined were people that really cared about the movement. They didn't care about money. And I think that was a great, when you think about it, it was a great social experiment that we had so many young people and farm workers too that joined the movement. The strikers that were on strike for 5 solid years and they didn't give up. Okay. And that was the main thing, that Cesar just really got the best of people, because Cesar believed in empowering people. You know, it's not so much a leader is somebody who empowers other people, and that's what Cesar was. He empowered other people, and he had people believe in themselves to make sure that they could really achieve what they needed to achieve. And and the other thing is, people really had to learn that nobody was going to do this for them, that they're the ones that had to get out there and they had to fight for their own rights and not to wait for somebody to come, like he would say, somebody coming in on the leader on a white horse is going to save you. That's never going to happen. You are the ones that have to save yourselves. And not to be afraid to reach out to other people to help, like on the grape boycott. Farm workers went to churches, they went to community centers, they went to labor unions, any place where they could talk to ask people to help. And people did help, you know. And that was the amazing part of it, that you had these farm workers from Delano, from Fresno, you know, from all these little towns up and down the valley that went to New York City. They went to Canada, they went to Europe, they went to Chicago, they went everywhere to tell their story and ask people to respond. And people responded. That is a great miracle, I think, of the boycott and the strike.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's so inspiring to hear those words. You know, you are writing, reading, and talking about history in school, but you're making history here. It's telling people that you don't have to. If it's too much to bear, you don't have to bear it. You can do something about it. You can change it. Yeah, you're not forced to be a bystander or a spectator. You are an agent of change, and you can change the course of history. And what an incredible, and join us and be part of it, and we'll change history together. What an incredibly inspiring message. And it sounds like it's, in hearing you talk about it, Dolores, it's almost like anybody who has a good heart and wants to do good things and acts in good faith would want to join the movement and, to fight for what's right and to change the injustice. It's really so incredible.
Yeah, one other thing is that, in order to pass the laws that we needed, yes, we got the contracts with the growers and we made improvements in the fields, like having toilets, having cold drinking water, having rest periods. But then we had to pass the laws. We had to pass the law for unemployment insurance. We had to pass the law for the right to have a union. And so the civic engagement, the registering people to vote, getting people out to vote, that lessons that we learned from the previous organization, the community service organization, where Fred Ross taught us all these important lessons about that you have to get out there, register people to vote, get them out to vote, put the pressure on the politician to pass the laws. So we were able to pass unemployment insurance for farm workers and the right to organize a union. So these were very important things that we were able to win. And the workers, again, they are the ones that did it themselves.
Yeah, I love it. It's sort of that old phrase, don't wait for the cavalry to arrive. You are the cavalry. You're the one who's going to change it. And it also, so many dimensions to fight on. Once you have a contract with the growers, which, probably seemed impossible at one point, but then, until it wasn't, then you got to go to Sacramento and get laws passed and have the governor sign it. You got to go to DC and do the same. There's so many fronts to fight on. And UFW has done it so successfully for so long. Roman, although we've come a long way, thanks to the Cesar Chavez's of the world, we still have a long way to go. What are the most critical issues impacting farm workers today from your vantage point? And what are community-based organizations like yours doing across the state to address those issues?
Yeah, thank you very much. Cesar Chavez said farm workers, when he was championing protections from pesticides, the farm workers are the canaries of the coal mine for our society. And that was true, continued to be true with some of the challenges regarding protection against pesticides and so many other challenges in our community. About 10 years ago, about 10 years ago, we were confronted with something that was very challenging. Season after season, numerous farm workers are dying of heat stroke. And so we knew that there was, non-compliance, too much non-compliance of not having enough water and protection against heat. But, we knew that the climate was changing. We were seeing hotter days, longer periods of hotter days, and we began seeing, increase of deaths. And so we began under Governor Schwarzenegger's administration to pursue additional protections because of that development that we began to see. Now we're beginning to hear farm workers, for example, in the table grape sector, experiencing the opposite of heat exhaustion. It's getting so cold during the pruning season that they're beginning to feel symptoms of hypothermia. And so, so it's another example of how farm workers are experiencing some of the challenges in regards to climate change. I think, the same is true. I mentioned the pandemic, inflation right now, and where the economy is going, not only in terms of the cost of living and how farm worker wages are not keeping up, double-digit inflation, right? When you're at the lower end of the pay scale, right? When everything is going up, it's not just 8% inflation. Everything has gone up because of, the challenges of being a wage earner in the state in some of these higher, economic areas. But the economy has drastically affected the labor market. And so farmers are depending more and more on the federal H-2A program. And so when you think about the challenges of farm workers in agriculture, whether you're immigrant, as a documented immigrant, like an H-2A worker, or undocumented, the levers that are available to employers and to supervisors and other folks who are, trying to figure out how to take advantage of vulnerable people is growing. Your counterpart Attorney General in the state of Washington is in partnership with us, Attorney General Ferguson, and we are in a lawsuit where we are actively investigating a systematic firing of 140 female farm workers replaced by H-2A workers. That is, and that suit came because those workers are organizing a union with the United Farm Workers, and so the empowerment in terms of just deciding to go through those steps, and it's uncovering. We're now investigating child labor and trafficking under the same people who are looking for victims in this particular labor class, farm workers class. So as the economy is headed in the direction, it's affecting not only us as farm workers as consumers, but as participants in the labor market. It's going to be ripe for further exploitation, as we're seeing in this state, in this example of Washington State. And we believe what I learned from Dolores and from many other folks who came before me is that when farm workers are empowered on the job, they elect a crew rep. That crew rep is trained, and when they see something, they sense something, whether it's a violation of the law or something unjust, when the empowerment through a collective bargaining agreement is present, that's the best way to protect farm workers, in our view, moving forward.
Wonderful. Thank you, Roman. We're at our final question that I want to pose to both of you. I'll start with Dolores. And it is this: how should those viewing the webinar today honor the legacy of Cesar Chavez in their communities?
Well, I would say support the union, support United Farm Workers. All of us deal with farm workers, all right? And there's a lot of farm workers out there. They're recent immigrants, like the ones that Roman described. They don't know about the union. They don't know that they have these protections that people died for. We had 5 people that were murdered in the farm worker movement. And so a lot of people went to jail. People lost their homes and everything else. And so encourage them to vote for the union, that they have protections under the Agricultural Labor Relations Law. And if you have a union contract, then you're protected. And also when you're part of the union, and you also get the information of things that you need to do to help change the laws. We know that working together, that we can all make it better for farm workers. Like the law that we passed last year with the Dolores Huerta Foundation participation to get all of our undocumented people here to have health care in California. So the message is out there to all farm workers that we're here to support them, but they need to also support and do something for themselves, okay? And get the information that they need. If they're exploited on the job, don't be afraid to report these. We have a lot of organizations, community-based organizations like the Dolores Huerta Foundation. We're here to help you, but we want you to join the union, okay? That is the best protection that you can possibly have.
Thank you, Dolores. And Roman, how should those watching today honor the legacy of Cesar Chavez and their communities?
Dolores, on Saturday, I remember something you said to me that stuck with me. As a college student, I worked swing shift, and during the uprisings in Los Angeles, I remember traveling late at night, coming home from the east side to the west side, and seeing Los Angeles, city that I'd grown up in. I mean, horizon to horizon, it was on fire. And I remember a few years later when I joined as a volunteer organizer with the UFW, Dolores said something that has stuck to me today. And this is an example of why good people need organizations. So we need to organize. And what I've learned in the union is organizations don't have to have buildings or, people organizations who have leaders and participants and members and activists, and maybe have a goal and make a plan to go reach that goal, whether it's increasing civic participation, voter registration, or supporting a boycott of a good cause, right? When people have organization, hope is possible. And so whether you want to support the farm workers or there's an issue in your local community, participate in an organization, build an organization. You want to learn how to build an organization? Call Dolores, call the UFW, we'll teach you. It's work, but it's rewarding. And thankfully in my career with the UFW, I never felt like I've worked here. This is what we do with farm workers and on a day-to-day basis, with inspired, by folks like Dolores and your story, Attorney General, right? So much is possible in terms of addressing the challenges in our community. And so my advice to folks is, let's build an organization, let's organize, let's come together and address some of the challenges in our communities.
Love it. Well, thank you. Support farm workers, join the UFW, organize, take action. All great advice that our viewers, I know, are taking to heart. And let me say thank you to both of you. The state, the nation, the world is a better place because of the work that you have done and that you're doing. Thank you for inspiring us today. We're honored for the presence of both of you, and I look forward to seeing you both soon. And Dolores, looking forward to seeing you and giving you a big hug the next time I get to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
All right. Now we are moving on to our next two guests who are joining us today to talk about UC Merced's Farm Workers Health Study. We have Ana Padilla, the Executive Director of the UC Merced Community and Labor Center, the largest labor center serving a rural region in the U.S. and the first new UC Labor Center in 6 decades, and Dr. Edward Flores, the Faculty Director at the center. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having us today.
Hello, I'm honored that you joined us. Thank you. I'm looking forward to our conversation. And let me jump in with my first question to both of you. When we can start with Ana Padilla. UC Merced's Community and Labor Center has recently released a farm workers health study addressing the issues faced by farm workers and public policy recommendations to address these issues. Can you tell us about how the study came about and the key findings in the study?
Sure, we'd be happy to. We prepared a little PowerPoint to help guide us along the question. First off, we'd like to thank Attorney General Rob Bonta and the Office of Community Awareness, Response, and Engagement at the California Department of Justice for the opportunity to be part of this Cesar Chavez Day event. The UC Merced Farm Worker Health Study came about in 2020 It was a result of a 2-year, 1.5 million one-time appropriation from the state of California to the California Department of Public Health, who sponsored UC Merced to carry out the farm worker health study. I served as co-PI on this project, along with Paul Brown, who's the UC Merced professor of health economics, and Edward Flores, who's the faculty director of the Community Labor Center. So researchers from UC Merced, UC Berkeley, Cahuilla Delta Medical Center, UC Agriculture and Natural Resources, and UC San Francisco also contributed to the study, as well as the Community Advisory Board, which I'll mention in a moment, and an Executive Advisory Committee. Next slide, please. The primary purpose of the studies of the farm worker health study was to determine the health of farm workers in California. Secondary aims included determining social determinants of health, such as healthcare access, healthcare coverage, and workforce health and training needs. Next slide, please. UC Merced Farm Worker Health Study is the largest academic survey on the health and well-being of agricultural workers, and we supplement the study of health by asking many key questions on workplace dynamics that have rarely or never been asked in previous major studies of farm worker health. Our survey asks questions about farm worker health and health access, but also about experiences with farm work and the quality of such work, such as employer compliance with wage and hour provisions, workplace health and safety standards, and fear of retaliation. Next slide, please. So we designed the Farm Worker Health Study as a community-engaged research project. In June 2020, we held our first meeting with the Farm Worker Community Advisory Board, or CAB, a collaborative comprised of the state's leading farm worker serving organizations, including Dolores Huerta and UFW, who we just heard from. So these 26 organizations consisted of community, worker, labor organizations, and they were engaged with the research study for over 2 years. The Farm Worker CAB provided strategic input during every step of the study, including the survey instrument and data collection. They identified several issue areas of interest at the first meeting, and we then developed 9 work groups to inform the development of the survey instrument. And it's really because of our CAB that we had questions related to items such as wage theft, the California heat standard, or women's reproductive health, questions that had rarely or never been asked in public health research on farm workers. Next question, please. Next slide, please. So the size of our agricultural worker study and its level of community engagement is really unmatched by anything in academic literature. 10 CAB organizations and 2 clinics conducted 1,242 in-person interviews with farm workers from August 2021 to January 2022. And interviews were 2 to 4 hours in length in 6 languages in 6 of the state's major farm working regions. Our study was carried out in Spanish, English, Mixteco, Zapotec, Triqui, and Ilocano. In addition, I think around 205 out of the 1,242 farm workers completed a more detailed medical survey and provided a non-fasting blood draw. Next slide. So in the Farm Worker Health Study, more than 1 in 3 California agricultural workers' self-reported health status was fair or poor. This is more than 3 times higher than the general working age population in California. Next slide, please. Farm workers were asked to identify whether they had been told by a doctor they had each of 11 common medical conditions requiring chronic management. 42% of farm workers, which included 37% of men and 47% of women, self-reported having been diagnosed with at least 1 chronic condition. The most chronic conditions included diabetes, hypertension, anxiety, depression, and asthma. Next slide, please. We also collected data on 2 measures of healthcare access, healthcare coverage, and utilization. More than half of farm workers did not have healthcare coverage. And when asked if they had visited a medical office within the past year, only 43% of farm workers claimed they had visited a doctor's clinic within the past year. This data suggests that the prevalence of disease and chronic disease may be much higher among farm workers than self-reports suggest, given that many farm workers face obstacles such as lack of healthcare coverage, healthcare utilization that may prevent them from receiving regular care and timely diagnoses. Next slide, please. In terms of women's reproductive health, farm worker women experienced elevated rates of 3 types of adverse pregnancy outcomes. So 14% of women who had ever given birth gave birth to a preterm baby, which is much higher than the state average of 9%. 15% had given birth to a baby with low birth weight, more than double the state average of 7%. And 5.4% had given birth to a baby with birth defects higher than the state average of 3%. Next slide. In regards to working standards, our survey respondents reported a high level of employer noncompliance with wage and hour provisions in agricultural work. So 19% of respondents said at some point that they were not paid wages owed to them by an employer. 15% said that they were paid all or part in cash, and 15% said they did not receive the minimum number of paid 10-minute rest breaks under state law. Next slide. Our survey also indicated troubling rates of employer noncompliance with workplace health and safety standards. 43% said that there was never a written heat illness plan posted at their workplace, even though such plans are mandated. When asked about different types of protective equipment needed but lacking for work, 32% said that respirators were lacking but always needed. 25% of those who worked applying pesticides reported that they did not receive any training on the use of pesticides. The size of our sample, which is 1,242 cases, means that our survey alone found hundreds of cases of workers who expressed experiencing employer noncompliance in the workplace. Next slide. When asked if they would report employer noncompliance that they witnessed, only 1 in 3 farm workers said that they would be willing to report noncompliance. Nearly 2 in 3, 64% of those persons said that they would be unwilling to file due to fear of retaliation, such as job loss or deportation. And the last slide, please. The survey also uncovered farm workers' limited citizenship rights. When we asked about qualifying for unemployment benefits, only 4 in 10, 41% of farm workers said that they would qualify for such benefits. In addition, most respondents expressed the highest level of fear, around 67%, when asked how often they worry about family separation due to deportation. I think that's the last slide.
Thank you. See if I. Thank you. Dr. Flores, did you want to add anything?
No, I think that in terms of just how this study came about to be and some of the major findings, Anna did a good job of just delivering those main points.
Okay. A very rigorous, robust, and in-depth study and very revealing. How do you hope that the study will help improve the health of farm workers across the state? How do we turn it into change?
That's a great question. Well, we hope first and foremost that our study advances a better understanding of the issues that California farm workers face in maintaining their health, the implications that employer noncompliance has employer non-compliance with workplace health and safety standards has on farm worker health, and the important role of policymaking in improving those standards. Our report ended with several recommendations for improving farm worker health, and a couple of them dealt specifically with state agencies and increasing employer compliance with working standards. One of them was that we should continue to invest public resources in protecting workers' rights. The substantial non-compliance with labor laws points to the need for stronger monitoring and enforcement of these standards by relevant agencies. So there should be greater funding for the state to hire the personnel required for greater labor standards enforcement. Public education is also key. Investing in worker rights education and training. The California Worker Outreach Project that the state just renewed for 2 years is a good example of this. And second, would be for the state to invest in public resources, to invest its public resources in agricultural development that raises industry standards. This is an industry with a track record of high rates of injury, illness, and death. And now climate disasters are making the job even more dangerous as ever. So the state should be allocating new or existing public resources towards those businesses and models that raise standards. The state might subsidize trade associations or growers that invest and participate in new certification programs that ensure protection of standards. Or the state's high road framework for economic development that's being used for the SURF. There's hundreds of millions of dollars in investment in economic development tied to this for the next few years. The state might also require that the massive existing investments in the UC Agriculture and Natural Resources unit be aligned with the high road framework. And lastly, I think we would say that there's not much guidance for advocates that are working on, working through the state's high road framework in terms of, being able to identify high road employers and lifting those standards. So the AG's office could play a role in clarifying, what is a good employer, right? Defining, how that relates to compliance with state laws so that other agencies have a firmer understanding of how to define employers and high roads for some of these public investments.
Thank you. To both of you, what was the most surprising revelation of the study? Or maybe nothing was, or what do you think is most powerful or most moving in what the study reveals?
I think what was very powerful and moving was the engagement that we had with the Community Advisory Board. I had 26 organizations, including the Lourdes Huerta Foundation. The Lourdes Huerta was, at our meetings. Just the commitment on behalf of those organizations across a period of now almost 3 years, informing every major stage of the development of the study and still being with us for the dissemination of the results and thinking about how to engage the public around the need for change. So I think that was very, I would not have, I guess, I shouldn't, we shouldn't be surprised, right? But the thing is that I think that was probably the most impressive thing across 3 years.
I totally agree.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, to have that level of engagement, that many interviews, that in depth, that honest, and the candor that you received, that was so helpful. You need to be trusted leaders, and clearly, the organizations in the coalition and you have earned and built that trust with the farm workers. So that's very special, and it's led to very meaningful data that can help drive policy, as you mentioned. And one of the things that we do is we remind those who could benefit from a reminder of their obligations and their duties, and including the legal compliance. And if we're hearing at scale that there are some violations and failures to adhere to existing law and comply with law, then we can direct guidance to those folks to make sure they know what their legal obligations are, that they're following them, and that the DOJ is watching. So this is very helpful, and we look forward to following up with you on the action. We always are interested in data, facts, and evidence, which you have provided a very unique and helpful body of, and we also are interested in the ensuing and subsequent action to take together. So thank you for everything that you have done here. I want to say we're talking about farm workers today and the legacy of protecting them. And so the work that you're doing clearly is important and helpful to the ability for farm workers to access healthcare and other essential services. Data-driven policy is our standard, and this provides the data for that policy. And so, again, thank you both for the work that you've been doing for so long and for joining us today to share it with us. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. All right, now I'd like to turn it over to Senior Assistant Attorney General Satoshi Yanai, who helps oversee the workers' rights and fair labor section at DOJ. He's here today to talk about the work he and his team are doing to protect the health, safety, and rights of workers across California, including farm workers. Welcome, Satoshi.
Thank you very much. In celebration of the legacy of Cesar Chavez, we all recognize that workers are the central agents of change in the workplace. California workers have a proud history of uniting to advocate and fight for better working conditions. At the California Department of Justice, we believe that the government also has a crucial role to play. The government can be a powerful ally to workers by ensuring that the laws protecting workers' economic security, health and safety, and dignity are vigorously enforced. The Worker Rights and Fair Labor section of the Department of Justice, which I have the privilege of leading, was created to level a playing field for workers and legitimate businesses. The Attorney General has given the section two key tasks. First, the section enforces the various state laws we have in place to protect workers from wage theft, misclassification, unsafe working conditions, and other violations. No worker in this state should have to suffer abusive and unlawful business practices. Second, the section advocates for changes in the law that will help California workers for the benefit of everyone in this state. Over the past years, the section has launched investigations and litigation targeting systemic business practices that undermine the rights of workers. The section has also engaged in advocacy on behalf of legal and policy initiatives to defend and expand protections for workers. For example, as you may know, the Attorney General's office has filed a lawsuit against ride-hail companies Uber and Lyft to hold them accountable for their years of misclassifying their employee drivers as independent contractors. This misclassification has deprived them of the benefits that the law bestows on employees, including the right to a minimum wage, overtime, and reimbursements for expenses. Our litigation against these companies continues. And the Attorney General did not forget the farm workers and other essential workers who continued to provide vital services when most of the economy shut down in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. No, our section leapt to action, even before clear legal workplace standards were in place. We reached out to dozens of growers, farm labor contractors, and food processing manufacturers in the early days of the pandemic. We did this to ensure that they were implementing the most current and ever-changing guidelines to protect their workers from illness and to have them test and report case counts to the local health authorities. We did this to let employers know that we were monitoring their activities, making sure that the welfare of essential workers were not ignored in the midst of this public health emergency. The Attorney General also achieved a first-of-its-kind judgment against Amazon. The judgment requires Amazon to provide detailed notice to their employees and to public health authorities about COVID exposures and case rates in their warehouses, in compliance with landmark new state legislation. This victory allowed workers in Amazon's warehouses, which continued to thrum with activity throughout the pandemic, to avoid the fear of uncertainty about the risks they faced at their workplace, and empowered them to make their own informed choices about whether to work or stay home in the best interests of themselves and their families. We've also advocated in court and to the federal government about policies to advance the interests of workers. As the economy slowly recovers from the devastation of the worst years of the COVID-19 pandemic, we supported the right of municipalities to enforce right of return ordinances to ensure that workers laid off during the pandemic for no fault of their own have the opportunity to return to their jobs when their employers start hiring again. As climate change has increased extended periods of extreme heat that can create life-threatening dangers for workers in the fields, in packing houses, in processing plants, and in warehouses, We joined other jurisdictions throughout the country in advocating for the Federal Occupational Safety and Health Administration to adopt both emergency, temporary, and permanent health and safety standards regarding both indoor and outdoor heat exposure. We led a coalition of states, filing a brief in support of the rights of states to set minimum labor standards and to support the application of such state wage guarantees to work performed by civil immigration detainees being held in detention facilities operated by private contractors under contract with federal immigration authorities. We also filed a brief to support the federal government against an attack by an employer on the very authority of federal OSHA to promulgate and enforce workplace safety rules as being beyond the authority granted by Congress, an attack that would carry potentially devastating consequences for the continued health and safety of workers in California and throughout the nation. And the Worker Rights and Fair Labor section is engaged in a variety of investigations in industries ranging from home care to construction to janitorial services, examining employer practices that threaten the livelihoods or safety of California workers. I also wanted to mention the work of another group of lawyers here at the California Department of Justice in the Government Law section. This team of lawyers works tirelessly to defend the labor laws of the state against legal challenges. This team has been actively defending from constitutional challenge AB 5, the law that lays out the test for determining when California workers must be classified as employees, not independent contractors. Workers in California will continue to face daunting obstacles in the years ahead. Employers who are willing to unlawfully sacrifice the economic or physical security of their workers in order to gain a competitive advantage have been endlessly creative in finding new means and methods to evade accountability. And phenomena such as climate change, wildfires, and public health emergencies have given rise to new challenges that fall disproportionately on our state's most vulnerable workers. No doubt further unexpected pitfalls lie ahead. The Department of Justice is dedicated to being equally creative and daring in finding ways to bring legal accountability to employers and provide justice to workers. Thank you.
Talking on mute. Okay, off mute. Hey, everybody. Thank you, Satoshi. I'm grateful for all the work you and your colleagues in the Workers' Rights and Fair Labor section do for California's workers. Thank you for the update and overview. And that wraps up today's event. Thanks to everyone who tuned in and to everyone on my team who made today possible. Thank you for joining us and for listening in. As you sign off, I hope you do so with a better understanding of the challenges farm workers face and the importance of fighting for their rights. And it was wonderful for me to hear directly from our speakers today, from those talking about action like Satoshi in our own office, work that we do every day, to those who are conducting breakthrough studies that are revealing challenges and problems and injustices that need addressing to help guide future action, to icons of the farm labor movement, including the one and only, the iconic Dolores Huerta, who continues to inspire generations and fight for justice, and reminds us that we all have agency, that we all have the power to make change. We don't have to wait for someone else to do it. In fact, we are the ones that are going to do it if it's going to happen at all. And that we have power and that we have the ability to create that change. And we can create more change when we work together, when we collaborate, when we unify, when we partner. And that we should always be judged on the action that we take, what we do, what we change, what justice we realize, what injustice we confront, and that it's always right to do what's right. And we will prevail eventually if we continue in that fight. So an incredible reminder of the legacy of Cesar Chavez, of the United Farm Workers of America, of the farm labor movement in California and beyond. And again, something very special to me as someone who grew up in a labor family, who was taught many of these lessons when I was young, firsthand from my own parents who were organizers themselves, who was taught that people across their differences coming together, committed to a common cause, can do anything. And that's what the farm worker movement was. It was the embodiment of that notion. And that's what unions are, banding together to make people's lives better, to take on challenges, to right wrongs. And that's the legacy that Cesar Chavez left behind, and that we should all try to carry with us today. Also, a final reminder, it doesn't matter if you're the California Attorney General, an activist at UFW, or a farm worker in the Central Valley. We all have an important role to play. We're all on the same team. We all have a voice that we can use to speak up for what's right, to demand fair pay, good working conditions, justice, and equality for every single Californian. So I hope you leave here today knowing that my team and I at the Department of Justice are committed to that fight. We will always do our part. We will always fight with those like-minded, committed to the same causes. And with that, I want to say once again, thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time. Thank you.